The sound of hooves pounding against hard-packed dirt echoed through Twin Falls, Idaho, in the summer of 1885, but Katherine Grant barely noticed as she slammed the ledger shut, her knuckles white with fury. 3 months of wages, Mr. Blackwell. That's what you owe me, and I won't leave until I get every last cent. The balding man behind the ornate desk of the Twin Falls Hotel adjusted his spectacles and smirked, his thin lips curling beneath his neatly trimmed mustache. Miss Grant, I believe I've made myself quite clear. Your services as our bookkeeper were inadequate. The discrepancies in our accounts speak for themselves. Katherine stood her ground, the dark green fabric of her dress rustling as she leaned forward. At 24, she had worked too hard to establish herself as a capable bookkeeper in a man's world to be dismissed without compensation. There were no discrepancies until you created them, sir. I've kept impeccable records. She tapped the leather-bound book she'd brought with her. Every transaction is documented here. You're refusing to pay me because you know I discovered your scheme to embezzle from the hotel owners. Harold Blackwell rose from his chair, his face flushing red beneath his receding hairline. That's quite enough, Miss Grant. Such accusations could ruin your reputation in this town. Who would believe a woman over a respected businessman like myself? Now remove yourself from my office before I call for the sheriff. Katherine clutched her personal ledger to her chest, blinking back tears of frustration. She needed those wages desperately. After her father's death last winter, she had taken on the responsibility of caring for her ailing mother. Without this money, they would lose their small rented home on the edge of town. This isn't over, she promised, her voice low and steady despite the trembling in her hands. I earned that money fairly. Blackwell merely waved her away, already turning his attention to other papers on his desk. The bright afternoon sunlight hit Katherine like a physical blow as she stepped onto the wooden boardwalk outside the hotel. She inhaled deeply, trying to calm herself. Twin Falls had grown substantially in recent years, the promise of the railroad bringing more settlers and businesses to the once tiny settlement. Katherine had thought herself fortunate to secure a position at the town's finest establishment, but now, careful there, madam. The deep voice startled her just as she nearly collided with a broad chest. Katherine stepped back, looking up to meet the bluest eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a tall man in a dust-covered duster, his dark hat pulled low over his brow. Despite the trailed dirt on his clothes, there was something striking about his strong jawline and the thoughtful set of his features. I apologize, she murmured, attempting to step around him, no harm done. The stranger's gaze lingered on her face, his expression shifting to concern. Are you all right, miss? You seem troubled. Katherine rarely shared her burdens with anyone, let alone strangers, but something in his direct gaze made her pause. Just a disagreement with my employer. She adjusted her grip on the ledger. Former employer, it seems. The man nodded slowly, removing his hat to reveal thick black hair with a slight wave to it. Isaac Turner, he introduced himself, extending a calloused hand. Just arrived in town. Katherine Grant, she replied, briefly accepting his handshake. His palm was warm and rough against her skin. Welcome to Twin Falls, Mr. Turner, though I'm afraid I'm not in a position to offer much hospitality at the moment. Isaac replaced his hat, his eyes still studying her face. Would it be too forward to offer to buy you a cup of coffee? You look like you could use a moment to collect yourself. Katherine hesitated. Her mother was expecting her home, but the thought of returning to tell her they would soon be destitute was unbearable. A few minutes' delay wouldn't matter. That's very kind, Mr. Turner. There's a cafe just down the street. As they walked, Katherine became acutely aware of how different Isaac was from the men she typically encountered in Twin Falls. He moved with a quiet confidence, his long strides measured to accommodate her shorter ones. He didn't fill the silence with unnecessary talk, and when he did speak, he addressed her directly, without the condescension she'd grown accustomed to. The cafe was nearly empty at this hour. They found a small table near the window, and a matronly woman soon brought them coffee in thick white mugs. So, Isaac said once they were alone, what kind of disagreement leaves a woman looking like she's ready to commit murder? Despite herself, Katherine smiled faintly. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's seen that particular look before, he replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. Usually right before someone reaches for a weapon. Katherine wrapped her fingers around the warm mug. My employer, Mr. Blackwell at the hotel, refuses to pay me for 3 months of work. He claims I made errors in the accounts, but it's a lie. She lowered her voice. The truth is, I discovered he's been stealing from the hotel owners. When I confronted him privately about it, hoping he would correct the issue, he dismissed me instead. Isaac listened intently, his expression hardening. And now he's withholding your wages to ensure your silence. Precisely, Katherine sighed. I could go to the owners, but they're rarely here. They live in Boise and only visit quarterly. Mr. Blackwell has been managing the hotel for years. They trust him implicitly. What about the law? Katherine laughed bitterly. Sheriff Briggs, he and Blackwell play poker together every Thursday night, besides without proof beyond my own records. She patted the ledger. Isaac took a slow sip of his coffee, considering. How much does he owe you? $75. It sounded like such a paltry sum to be fighting for, but to Katherine it represented survival. He whistled softly. A fair amount. What kind of work were you doing? I'm a bookkeeper. I've been managing the hotel's accounts for nearly a year now. She lifted her chin slightly, expecting the usual dismissive reaction to a woman in such a role. Instead, Isaac nodded thoughtfully. Skilled work. I've known a few women bookkeepers in my travels. Most were sharper than their male counterparts. He studied her for a moment. You mentioned your own records. You kept duplicates? Katherine patted the ledger beside her. I always maintain my own record of all transactions I handle. It's a habit my father taught me. He was an accountant before his health failed. A slow smile spread across Isaac's face, transforming his serious expression. Miss Grant, I believe you might have exactly what you need to get justice. How so? Blackwell will just claim my records are fabricated. Isaac leaned forward, lowering his voice. Let me ask you this. In your position, did you handle correspondence with the hotel owners? Yes, I drafted most of the monthly reports that Mr. Blackwell sent to them. And the owners' signatures. Have you seen them? Would you recognize them? Katherine's brow furrowed. Yes, on various documents. Mr. Turner, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that a man who steals from his employers probably isn't sending them accurate monthly reports. I'm also suggesting that you might know exactly how to contact those owners directly. His blue eyes held a gleam of challenge. The question is, are you willing to fight for what's yours? Katherine felt a flutter of both apprehension and excitement. Mr. Blackwell is a powerful man in this town, and you're an honest woman being robbed of her due. Isaac's voice was firm. Sometimes justice needs a little assistance. Katherine studied him, trying to understand why this stranger would involve himself in her troubles. Why would you help me? Isaac's expression softened slightly. Let's just say I've seen too many good people cheated by those who think their position puts them above consequences. He paused. Besides, I'm between jobs at the moment. Could use something worthwhile to occupy my time. Katherine couldn't help but smile at his candor. And what is it you do, Mr. Turner, when you are employed? Bit of this, bit of that. Mostly I work with cattle driving herds, breaking horses, seasonal work which leaves gaps to fill. He tipped his head toward her ledger. I'm no bookkeeper, but I've dealt with my share of dishonest men. Katherine considered his offer, weighing the risks against her desperate situation. Her mother needed medicine, they needed food, and the rent was due in 2 weeks. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Very well, Mr. Turner, I accept your help, though I'm not sure what I can offer in return. Isaac waved away her concern. Let's focus on getting your money first, then perhaps you can treat me to dinner with a small portion of your rightfully earned wages. The smile that accompanied his words made Katherine's cheeks warm inexplicably. That seems fair, she agreed, extending her hand to seal their arrangement. As their hands met across the table, Katherine had the strange sensation that this chance encounter might change more than just her financial situation. There was something in Isaac Turner's steady gaze that spoke of reliability, of strength tempered by kindness, qualities she had learned were rare in men. Now, Isaac said, releasing her hand, tell me everything about Harold Blackwell and how he runs that hotel. Leave nothing out, no matter how insignificant it might seem. For the next hour, Katherine outlined Blackwell's operation, his schedule, his associates, his habits, and most importantly, the nature of his embezzlement scheme. Isaac listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed a surprisingly sharp mind behind his rugged exterior. As the afternoon light began to fade, Katherine realized how late it had grown. "I should return home. My mother will be worried." Isaac nodded, standing to help her with her chair. "Meet me tomorrow morning at 9 here at the cafe. I'll have a plan by then." Katherine gathered her ledger, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Mr. Turner," she said as they stepped outside, "I don't know why fate brought you to Twin Falls today, but I'm grateful it did." Isaac touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. "Sometimes a man finds himself exactly where he needs to be, Miss Grant, until tomorrow." As Katherine watched him stride away down the street, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the promise of summer heat already heavy in the air. Katherine dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a pale blue cotton with white piping that her mother had insisted she wear. "If you're meeting a gentleman, Katherine, you should look your best," Elizabeth Grant had insisted, despite Katherine's protests that this was a business arrangement, nothing more. Now, as she made her way to the cafe, Katherine found herself smoothing the fabric of her skirt and adjusting her simple straw hat, adorned with only a blue ribbon that matched her dress. She told herself it was merely professional pride, not the memory of Isaac Turner's compelling blue eyes, that made her take such care with her appearance. The cafe was busier than the previous afternoon, with several tables occupied by townspeople enjoying their morning coffee. Katherine spotted Isaac immediately, seated at a corner table, his back to the wall and his eyes on the door. He stood as she approached, and Katherine couldn't help noticing that he, too, had made an effort with his appearance. His dark hair was neatly combed, his face clean-shaven, and he wore a fresh shirt under a well-worn but clean vest. "Miss Grant," he greeted her, pulling out a chair. "I took the liberty of ordering coffee." "Thank you, Mr. Turner." Katherine settled across from him, placing her ledger on the table. "Have you formulated a plan?" Isaac's mouth curved in a half-smile. "Direct and practical, I like that." He leaned forward, keeping his voice low. "I made some inquiries yesterday evening. Seems your Mr. Blackwell has quite the reputation in town." "Oh." Katherine accepted the coffee the waitress brought, nodding her thanks. "Yes, and not just as a businessman. He's known to frequent Madame Louise's establishment on the edge of town, despite his public stance on moral propriety." Isaac's expression remained neutral, but Katherine caught the implication. "The brothel," she whispered, her eyes widening slightly. "That's hardly surprising, though I don't see how it helps us." "It helps because he goes every Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock, according to several reliable sources, and while he's there, his office is empty." Isaac raised his eyebrows meaningfully. Katherine nearly choked on her coffee. "You're suggesting we break into his office? That's illegal." "Not if you have a key." Isaac reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, quickly covering it with his hand. "And not if we're simply recovering documentation that rightfully belongs to the hotel owners." Katherine stared at where his hand rested. "How did you—" The hotel bartender is a talkative fellow, especially after a few drinks. "Seems Blackwell has made enemies of most of his staff with his arrogant ways." Isaac revealed a small brass key. "This opens the side door that leads directly to the hotel offices. The night clerk, a young man named Peter, is willing to look the other way for an hour tonight." Katherine hesitated, her mind racing with both moral qualms and practical concerns. "If we're caught, we won't be," Isaac assured her. "I've done riskier things than this." At her skeptical look, he added, "Nothing criminal, just delicate situations that required discretion." "You're not being entirely forthcoming about your past, Mr. Turner," Katherine observed. Isaac's expression grew more serious. "No, I'm not. But I promise you, Miss Grant, I'm on the right side of justice, even if I occasionally take an unconventional path to get there." He held her gaze steadily. "Do you trust me enough to proceed?" Katherine considered the question carefully. Did she trust this man she'd known for less than a day? There was something about Isaac Turner that inspired confidence, a steadiness, a quiet strength that seemed genuine. And pragmatically speaking, she had few options left. "Yes," she finally said. "I trust you enough for this. What exactly are we looking for in his office?" Isaac's posture relaxed slightly at her affirmative answer. "Two things: proof of your employment and the wages owed to you, and evidence of his embezzlement to leverage against him if necessary." He tapped her ledger. "With your records, we should be able to identify the relevant documents quickly." "There's a safe in his office," Katherine informed him. "He keeps the most sensitive financial information there." "Can you open it?" Katherine smiled for the first time that morning. "I'm the bookkeeper, Mr. Turner. I know all the combinations." Isaac's surprised laugh drew glances from nearby tables. "Miss Grant, you continue to impress me." The warmth in his voice sent an unexpected thrill through Katherine. They spent the next hour refining their plan, with Katherine sketching the layout of the hotel's offices and explaining Blackwell's filing system. As they prepared to leave, Isaac placed his hand briefly over hers. "Tonight at 8:30, meet me at the alley beside the hotel. Wear something dark if you have it, and bring your ledger." His touch was warm, reassuring. "We'll get what's rightfully yours, Katherine, I promise you that." The use of her first name shouldn't have affected her so strongly, but Katherine found herself replaying the moment in her mind as she walked home, the gentle pressure of his hand, the determination in his voice, the way her name sounded in his deep timbre. The remainder of the day passed with excruciating slowness. Katherine helped her mother with household chores, carefully avoiding any mention of her meeting with Isaac or their planned evening activities. Elizabeth Grant was a kind woman, but firmly conventional in her beliefs. She would be horrified to learn her daughter was planning to sneak into an office at night with a man she barely knew. As evening approached, Katherine changed into her darkest dress, a navy blue wool that she typically reserved for winter despite the summer warmth. She explained to her mother that she was visiting her friend Clara, who worked as a seamstress and often required evening fittings. "Don't be too late, dear," Elizabeth cautioned. "These streets aren't safe for a young woman after dark." "I'll be careful, Mother," Katherine promised, guilt twisting in her stomach at the deception. She kissed her mother's cheek and slipped out into the gathering dusk, her ledger concealed in a plain cloth bag. The town was quieter now, with most respectable establishments closing for the evening while the saloons were just beginning their nightly business. Katherine kept to the shadows as much as possible, her heart pounding as she approached the agreed meeting place. Isaac appeared silently beside her, materializing from the darkness of the alley. "Right on time," he murmured, his face half hidden beneath the brim of his hat. "Is everything still as planned?" Katherine whispered, nervously clutching her bag. "Yes, I watched Blackwell leave 10 minutes ago, heading for Madame Louise's as expected. Peter will unlock the side door at exactly 8:30 and then conveniently need to check the boiler room for the next hour." Isaac offered her his arm. "Shall we?" Katherine placed her hand on his forearm, drawing strength from his steady presence. They moved quietly along the alley to a plain wooden door set into the side of the imposing brick hotel. At precisely 8:30, they heard a soft click as the lock was turned from inside. The door opened a crack, revealing the anxious face of a young man. "You've got 1 hour," Peter whispered. "After that, I can't guarantee someone won't come by." "Thank you," Isaac replied, slipping the young man several coins. "This will help with your mother's medicine." Peter nodded gratefully before disappearing down the dimly lit corridor. Isaac held the door for Katherine, and they slipped inside, closing it quietly behind them. The hotel's administrative offices were located in a separate wing from the guest rooms, ensuring privacy for business matters. Katherine led the way, moving confidently through the familiar hallways until they reached Blackwell's office. Isaac produced the key, and with a soft click, the door swung open. The office was exactly as Katherine remembered it: ostentatious furniture, expensive carpet, and the large oak desk that Blackwell used to intimidate his employees and impress visitors. A portrait of the man himself hung on one wall, his expression as smug in paint as it was in person. "The safe is behind that painting," Katherine whispered, pointing to a landscape of the Snake River on the opposite wall. Isaac moved the painting aside, revealing a small wall safe. "Your moment, Miss Grant." Katherine stepped forward, her fingers trembling slightly as she turned the dial. Left to 18, right to 35, left to 7. Blackwell's birth date, a predictable choice. The safe door swung open, revealing several stacks of documents and a small cash box. "Let me check the documents first," Katherine said, pulling them out carefully. She spread them on the desk, quickly scanning through ledgers and correspondence with practiced eyes. "Here," she eventually said, pulling out a small leather-bound book. "This is his true accounting ledger, and look at this." She opened it to a particular page, pointing to a series of entries. "He's been inflating expenses and pocketing the difference. Over the past year, he's stolen nearly $2,000 from the owners." Isaac whistled softly. "That's a substantial sum, enough to see him jailed if the owners press charges." "And here," Katherine continued, pulling out another document, "is the employment ledger with my name and agreed-upon wages." She ran her finger down to a notation in Blackwell's handwriting. "He's marked me as terminated for incompetence with no final payment due. The liar." Isaac's expression darkened. "We have what we need to confront him, but let's make copies of the relevant pages first, just to be safe." Katherine nodded, quickly using the desk supplies to make notations and careful copies of the most damning evidence. As she worked, Isaac kept watch at the door, his body tense with alertness. "We should check the cash box too," he suggested when she had finished with the documents. Katherine opened it to reveal several stacks of banknotes and a pouch of coins. This must be the hotel's petty cash fund. She counted quickly. $242, far more than should be kept on hand according to hotel policy. "Your wages would be $75 of that," Isaac noted. "It would be simple justice to take it now." Katherine hesitated, her hand hovering over the money. "That would be theft." "Is it theft to take what's rightfully yours, what he's legally obligated to pay you?" Isaac challenged gently. "I'm not suggesting taking more than your earned wages." Katherine's principles warred with her practical needs. Taking the money would solve her immediate problems, but it would also give Blackwell ammunition against her if he discovered the theft. "No," she finally decided. "We do this properly. With the evidence we have, we can force him to pay me legitimately without compromising our position." She carefully replaced the cash box in the safe. "Let's finish copying these records and go. We've been here nearly half an hour already." Isaac nodded, respect evident in his eyes. "Your integrity does you credit, Katherine." They worked quickly to complete their documentation, carefully returning everything to its original place. Just as Katherine was closing the safe, they heard voices in the corridor, one of them unmistakably Blackwell's. "He's back early," Katherine whispered, panic rising in her throat. "This is impossible. He never returns before midnight on Tuesdays." Isaac moved swiftly, extinguishing the lamp they'd been using and plunging the room into darkness. He took Katherine's arm, guiding her behind the large desk. "Stay down," he breathed against her ear, his body shielding hers as they crouched in the shadows. The voices grew louder, stopping just outside the office door. Katherine's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give them away. "I tell you, Jenkins, I saw a light in my office window from the street," Blackwell was saying. "Someone is in there. Probably just reflections from the saloon across the way," another man, presumably Jenkins, replied. "Or maybe Peter was in checking something." "That boy better not be poking around my office," Blackwell grumbled. There was the jangling of keys and then the sound of the lock turning. Katherine pressed closer to Isaac, terror freezing her in place. His arm tightened around her waist, steadying her. "Trust me," he whispered, so softly she barely heard it. The door swung open and light from the hallway spilled into the room. Blackwell stood silhouetted in the doorway, peering into the darkness. "See, nothing here, must have been a reflection." "Told you," Jenkins said, sounding bored. "Now can we get back to our game? Wilson was just about to lose his shirt to me." Blackwell hesitated, then stepped into the room, moving toward the desk. Katherine stopped breathing, certain they were about to be discovered. Isaac's hand moved to his belt, where Katherine suddenly realized he carried a pistol. Just then, a tremendous crash sounded from somewhere down the hall, followed by shouting. Blackwell whirled around. What the devil? He hurried back to the door. Jenkins, check that out. Both men rushed toward the commotion, leaving the office door ajar. Isaac didn't hesitate. He grabbed Katherine's hand and pulled her to her feet. Now, he whispered urgently. Side door. They slipped out of the office and down the corridor in the opposite direction from the noise, reaching the side door without encountering anyone. Isaac eased it open, and they stepped out into the alley, quickly pulling the door shut behind them. Walk, don't run, Isaac instructed, keeping her hand firmly in his as they moved at a brisk but not suspicious pace away from the hotel. Once they'd turned the corner onto a residential street, Katherine sagged against a fence, her legs weak with relief. What was that crash? Did you arrange it? Isaac shook his head, looking as surprised as she felt. Pure luck. Seems like someone upstairs is looking out for us. He glanced back toward the hotel. We got what we needed. Now we need to decide how to use it. Katherine clutched her bag containing their copied evidence. We should write to the owners immediately. With proof of Blackwell's embezzlement, they'll have to act. It could take weeks to get a response, Isaac pointed out. Do you have that kind of time? Katherine thought of her dwindling pantry, her mother's medicine running low. No, she admitted. But what choice do we have? Isaac considered for a moment. There might be a more immediate solution. Blackwell values his reputation above all else, doesn't he? Obsessively, Katherine confirmed. He's cultivated his image as a pillar of the community for years. Then that's our leverage. Isaac's eyes gleamed with determination in the moonlight. Tomorrow morning, we pay Mr. Blackwell a visit with copies of our evidence in hand and the promise that his misdeeds will become very public if he doesn't make things right. Katherine considered the plan, her analytical mind quickly identifying potential problems. He could simply deny everything, claim the documents are forgeries. It would be his word against mine. That's why we need a witness, someone respected in town whose presence would lend credibility to our claims. Isaac thought for a moment. Does Blackwell have any rivals in the business community? Someone who'd enjoy seeing him taken down a peg? Katherine smiled slowly as an idea formed. Better than a rival. Judge Williams stays at the hotel whenever he's in town for court sessions. He's arriving tomorrow for the monthly circuit court. The judge is known for his strict views on financial impropriety. Isaac's answering smile was brilliant. Perfect. We'll approach Blackwell early before he can dodge us and suggest that our next stop will be a meeting with the judge. He squeezed her hand gently. This will work, Katherine, I promise you. They walked in companionable silence toward Katherine's home, their shoulders occasionally brushing. The night air was warm, filled with the scents of summer dust and sage and the occasional sweetness of honeysuckle growing wild along fences. You've done this before, haven't you? Katherine finally asked. Helping people who have been wronged. Isaac was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was reflective. My father was a rancher in Wyoming. Small spread, but it was ours. When I was 16, a cattle baron moved into the area and decided he wanted our water rights. When my father refused to sell, things got ugly. He paused. Men came in the night, our barn was burned, my father was shot defending our home. Isaac, Katherine breathed, instinctively reaching for his arm. I'm so sorry. He covered her hand with his own. The local law was in the baron's pocket. There was no justice to be had through official channels, so my mother and I packed what we could save and left. His jaw tightened at the memory. I promised myself then that I'd never stand by while the powerful preyed on those with less influence. Is that why you came to Twin Falls? To help people? Isaac chuckled softly, the tension easing from his features. Actually, I came looking for work. The cattle drive I was with ended in Boise, and I heard there might be opportunities here. His eyes found hers in the moonlight. Meeting you was chance. Deciding to help was choice. They had reached Katherine's modest home, a small house with a neat garden that her mother tended despite her failing health. A single light burned in the front window. Tomorrow at 8, Isaac said, reluctantly releasing her hand. I'll meet you at the cafe again and we'll go to Blackwell together. I'll be ready, Katherine promised, And Isaac, thank you, not just for helping me, but for trusting me with your story. Isaac touched the brim of his hat, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Rest well, Katherine. Tomorrow we get justice. As Katherine watched him walk away, she realized she was more concerned about what would happen after tomorrow, when Isaac Turner would no longer have a reason to stay in Twin Falls. Morning came with a crispness that belied the summer heat to follow. Katherine dressed with particular care, choosing a severe gray dress that she hoped projected capability and seriousness. She arranged her dark blonde hair in a simple but neat style, securing it with pins. Her mother noticed her preoccupation as she prepared a simple breakfast. "You seem nervous today, Katherine. Is everything all right?" Katherine set 2 plates of toast and eggs on their small table. "I have an important meeting this morning. It could resolve our financial difficulties." Elizabeth Grant studied her daughter with knowing eyes. "Does this meeting involve the young man Clara mentioned seeing you with yesterday?" Katherine nearly dropped her fork. "Clara saw me. This is a small town, dear," her mother reminded her gently. "Clara was visiting Mrs. Henderson and saw you walking with a tall stranger. She was quite concerned for your safety." Heat crept up Katherine's cheeks. "His name is Isaac Turner. He's helping me with a problem at the hotel." She hesitated, then decided her mother deserved some of the truth. "Mr. Blackwell refused to pay my final wages. Mr. Turner is assisting me in recovering what I'm owed." Elizabeth's eyebrows rose. "And what does this Mr. Turner get in return for his assistance?" "Mother." "It's nothing improper," Katherine protested, though the warmth in her cheeks intensified. "He simply believes in justice." "I see," Elizabeth said, in a tone that suggested she saw rather more than Katherine might wish. "Well, I hope your meeting is successful. We could certainly use those wages." Katherine squeezed her mother's hand. "I'll do everything I can to resolve this today." After breakfast, Katherine gathered the evidence they had collected and placed it carefully in her bag. With a final reassuring smile to her mother, she set off for the cafe, her stomach tight with nervous anticipation. Isaac was waiting outside rather than at their usual table, his tall figure drawing glances from passers-by. He was dressed more formally than Katherine had seen him before, in a clean black coat and a string tie, his dark hair neatly combed beneath his hat. The effect was striking. He looked more like a successful businessman than a cowboy. "You clean up well, Mr. Turner," Katherine greeted him, unable to keep a note of appreciation from her voice. Isaac's eyes traveled over her own carefully chosen attire, a hint of admiration in his gaze. "As do you, Miss Grant. I thought it best we present ourselves as professionally as possible for this encounter." "A wise decision." Katherine patted her bag. "I have all our evidence here, including the copies we made last night." "Good." Isaac offered his arm. "Shall we go face the lion in his den?" The hotel was bustling with morning activity as they entered the grand lobby. The night clerk, Peter, was just ending his shift. He gave them a small nod of recognition, but otherwise maintained a neutral expression. "Mr. Blackwell should be in his office by now," Katherine murmured as they approached the front desk. "He's typically there by 7:30. The day clerk looked up as they approached. "May I help you? We have business with Mr. Blackwell," Isaac stated firmly. "Please inform him that Miss Grant and Mr. Turner are here to see him." "Do you have an appointment?" the clerk asked, clearly recognizing Katherine and looking confused by her presence with this unfamiliar man. "Our business is urgent and private," Isaac replied, his tone brooking no argument. "Please tell Mr. Blackwell we'll wait no more than 5 minutes before seeking out Judge Williams instead." The clerk's eyes widened at the mention of the judge. Without further question, he hurried toward the administrative offices. Katherine and Isaac exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement that their strategy was underway. Less than 3 minutes later, the clerk returned, looking slightly flustered. "Mr. Blackwell will see you now. Please follow me." They were led to the now familiar office, where Harold Blackwell sat behind his imposing desk, his expression a carefully composed mask of polite inquiry. Only the tightness around his eyes betrayed his tension at seeing Katherine return with an unknown ally. "Miss Grant," he greeted her coldly before turning his attention to Isaac. "And Mr. Turner, Isaac supplied, his voice pleasant but firm. Isaac Turner, thank you for seeing us on such short notice. Blackwell gestured to the chairs across from his desk with reluctance. The desk clerk mentioned something about Judge Williams. I assume there's a purpose to this. Intrusion, Katherine and Isaac seated themselves, and Katherine placed her bag deliberately on her lap, drawing Blackwell's attention to it. Indeed there is, Isaac replied. We're here about a matter of wages unlawfully withheld and certain, accounting irregularities that Miss Grant has documented. Blackwell's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. I've already explained to Miss Grant that her services were unsatisfactory and that her claims for additional payment are groundless. Interesting, Katherine said, opening her bag and withdrawing a sheet of paper. Because according to the hotel's own employment records, which we've taken the liberty of copying, I was employed at a rate of $25 per month, with no disciplinary notations until the day you terminated me. She placed the copy on his desk. 3 months' wages, $75 in total. Blackwell barely glanced at the paper. Anyone can fabricate documents, Miss Grant. This proves nothing. Perhaps, Isaac interjected smoothly, but these might be more persuasive. He nodded to Katherine, who produced more papers from her bag. These are copies of the actual hotel accounts, Katherine explained, laying them beside the employment record, compared with the reports you've been sending to the owners. She placed the final document on top. The discrepancies total nearly $2,000 over the past year alone. Blackwell's face had grown progressively paler as she spoke, but he rallied quickly. This is preposterous. You broke into my office and stole private documents. I'll have you both arrested. We stole nothing, Isaac stated calmly. Every document is still exactly where it belongs in your safe, in your files. We merely made copies. He leaned forward slightly. Copies that will be presented to Judge Williams within the hour unless we reach an understanding. Katherine watched Blackwell's mind working behind his eyes, calculating his options. The judge is a personal friend, he finally said, though his confident tone had faltered. The judge is a man who built his reputation prosecuting financial fraud in boys, Katherine countered. Do you really believe your friendship will outweigh his professional ethics? Blackwell's composure finally cracked. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. What do you want? Money, is this blackmail? Isaac rose as well, his height giving him a natural advantage as he looked down at the hotel manager. This isn't blackmail, Mr. Blackwell. It's justice. Miss Grant wants only what she earned her $75 in back wages. As for the larger matter of your embezzlement, that's between you and the hotel owners. Unless, Katherine added, seeing the opening, you attempt to retaliate against us in any way. Then the owners will receive full documentation of your activities, along with a detailed explanation of how you attempted to silence me by withholding my wages. Blackwell sank back into his chair, the fight draining from him. $75, he repeated. That's all you want. That's all I'm owed, Katherine confirmed. After a long moment, Blackwell pulled open a drawer and removed the cash box they'd seen in the safe the previous night. With jerky movements, he counted out $75 and pushed the stack across the desk. Take it and get out, he said, his voice cold with hatred. And understand this, you'll never work in this town again, Miss Grant. I'll see to that personally. Katherine began to reach for the money, but Isaac placed a restraining hand on her arm. I believe Miss Grant is also owed a letter of reference, he said, his voice dangerously soft. One that accurately reflects her competence and integrity. Blackwell's face contorted with rage. You're pushing your luck, Turner. No, Isaac replied evenly. I'm ensuring that your attempt to ruin Miss Grant's reputation doesn't succeed. Write the letter, Blackwell. Now. Something in Isaac's steady gaze must have conveyed the seriousness of his demand, because Blackwell finally reached for a sheet of hotel stationery and began writing, his pen scratching furiously across the paper. When he finished, he thrust the letter at them along with the money. Satisfied. Katherine read the letter carefully. It was brief, but stated clearly that she had worked competently as the hotel's bookkeeper and was leaving to pursue other opportunities. It wasn't enthusiastic, but it was factual and contained no negative remarks. "This will do," she said, tucking both the letter and the money into her bag. "One final point," Isaac said, his tone conversational but his eyes hard. "If I hear that you've spoken ill of Miss Grant to potential employers, or if you attempt to cause her any difficulty whatsoever, I will personally ensure that every business owner in Idaho Territory receives copies of these documents." He tapped the evidence they'd laid out. "Are we understood?" Blackwell's hatred was palpable, but he nodded stiffly. "Excellent," Isaac said, gathering up their copies of the evidence. "Good day to you, Mr. Blackwell. I suggest you consider a change in your accounting practices immediately." Katherine rose with as much dignity as she could muster. "Thank you for resolving this matter, Mr. Blackwell," she said formally, unable to resist the small victory of courtesy in the face of his defeat. Isaac offered her his arm, and together they walked out of the office and through the hotel lobby, maintaining their composure until they reached the street outside. Once there, Katherine let out a long breath, her legs suddenly unsteady. "We did it," she whispered, squeezing Isaac's arm. "I can hardly believe it worked." Isaac guided her to a bench beneath a tree, away from curious passers-by. "You were magnificent," he told her, his blue eyes warm with admiration. "The way you presented the evidence, so calm and professional, I doubt a lawyer could have done better." Katherine felt her cheeks flush with pleasure at his praise. "We make a good team," she said. "Your presence was compelling. I suspect Blackwell isn't used to being confronted by someone he can't intimidate." Isaac smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Few men are truly dangerous, but most can recognize when they're facing someone who is." His smile turned rueful. "I've had to learn to stand my ground over the years." Katherine opened her bag and looked at the stack of bills, her hard-earned wages, finally in her possession. Relief washed over her, followed immediately by a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, blinking rapidly. "This money, it means my mother can have her medicine, that we can keep our home. You've saved us, Isaac." Isaac's expression softened. "You did most of the work yourself, Katherine. I just provided some leverage." He hesitated, then added, "And I believe you promised me dinner from your earnings, though I'd understand if you need to use the money for more pressing matters." Katherine laughed, the sound bright with happiness and relief. "I absolutely did, and I absolutely will honor that promise, though I think I owe you far more than a simple dinner." "Dinner with good company is worth quite a lot in my estimation," Isaac replied, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. For a moment, they simply sat together, the morning sun warming them as the town bustled around them, unaware of their small victory. Katherine found herself studying Isaac's profile, noting the strength in his jawline, the tiny lines at the corner of his eye that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor might indicate. "What will you do now?" she finally asked, reluctant to break the peaceful moment but needing to know his plans. Isaac turned to face her. "I came to Twin Falls looking for work. That hasn't changed," he paused, "though I find myself increasingly reluctant to leave." The implication in his words sent a flutter through Katherine's chest. "I thought you worked with cattle. There's not much ranching in Twin Falls itself." "There's the Miller Ranch just outside town," Isaac said. "I heard they're looking for a foreman. I thought I might inquire there." Hope rose in Katherine's heart. "The Millers are good people, fair employers. And," Isaac continued, his voice growing softer, "I've discovered there are other reasons to consider staying in Twin Falls. Someone should ensure Blackwell keeps his word about not interfering with your future employment." Katherine found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by the warmth in his blue eyes. "Is that the only reason?" Isaac's gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. "Not even close to the only reason," he admitted, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down Katherine's spine. The moment was interrupted by the town clock striking 10, reminding Katherine of her responsibilities. "I should get home," she said reluctantly. "My mother will be anxious to hear how things went." Isaac stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Of course, family comes first." As Katherine rose, he didn't immediately release her hand. Would it be too forward to call on you properly, perhaps tomorrow evening? Katherine felt a smile bloom across her face. Not too forward at all, I'd like that very much. Until tomorrow, then. Isaac raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. The gesture, old-fashioned and courtly, sent warmth spreading through Katherine's entire being. Until tomorrow, she echoed, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. As she walked home, her steps were lighter than they had been in months. She had her wages, a clean reference letter, and the promise of seeing Isaac Turner again. For the first time since her father's death, Katherine felt that perhaps fate had finally turned in her favor. Over the next 2 weeks, Isaac became a regular visitor to the Grant household. His courtship of Katherine progressed with a directness that matched his character. No games, no pretenses, just an honest man who knew his own mind and heart. Isaac secured the position at the Miller Ranch, impressing the aging rancher with his knowledge of cattle and horses. The job came with a small cabin on the property, which he set about improving immediately. Katherine, with Blackwell's reference letter, found new employment as a bookkeeper for the town's general store, whose owner was delighted to hire someone with her qualifications. The hours were better than at the hotel, and the atmosphere far more pleasant. On a warm Sunday afternoon in late July, Katherine and Isaac sat on the small porch of her home, enjoying the relative coolness as the sun began its descent. Elizabeth Grant had tactfully excused herself to visit a neighbor, giving the couple some privacy. "The cabin's coming along," Isaac said, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms tanned and strong from outdoor work. "Put a new roof on this week. No more leaks." Katherine smiled, watching the play of emotions across his expressive face. In these quiet moments, when it was just the two of them, Isaac's serious demeanor softened, revealing the gentle heart beneath his strong exterior. "Mrs. Miller mentioned you've been breaking that wild Mustang they captured last month," Katherine said. "She seemed quite impressed that you succeeded where others failed." Isaac shrugged modestly. "The trick is patience. Most men try to dominate a horse through fear. I prefer to earn their trust." He glanced at her, his eyes twinkling. "Works with people too sometimes," Katherine laughed softly. "Is that how you won me over? Patience and trust. Did I win you over?" Isaac asked, suddenly serious. "Have I earned your trust, Katherine?" The directness of the question made her heart beat faster. "Yes," she answered simply, "more than anyone I've ever known." Isaac reached for her hand, enfolding it in his larger one. "I've been thinking a lot about the future lately." "Have you?" Katherine's voice came out slightly breathless. "I came to Twin Falls looking for work, expecting to move on when the season changed, as I've done for years." His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "But now I find I don't want to leave. For the first time since my father died, I've found someone that feels like home." Katherine felt tears prick at her eyes. "Isaac, I know it hasn't been long," he continued, his voice deep with emotion, "but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He shifted, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small object. "Katherine Grant, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened his hand to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl set in the center. Katherine stared at the ring, then at Isaac's face, seeing vulnerability and hope in his blue eyes. In that moment, she knew her answer with absolute certainty. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you." Joy transformed his features as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the pearl catching the late afternoon sunlight. "It was my mother's," Isaac explained. "I wrote to her last week telling her about you. She sent it by express mail, said it belonged on the finger of the woman who had finally captured her wandering son's heart." Katherine admired the ring, its simple elegance perfectly suited to her practical nature. "It's beautiful, I'll treasure it always." She looked up at him, her heart so full it felt it might burst. "Your mother, will she come for the wedding?" "She hopes to," Isaac said. "She's living with my sister in Denver now." He lifted Katherine's hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her fingers just above the ring. "When would you like to marry? I know your mother relies on you." "Mother is actually doing much better with the new medicine doctor." "Patterson prescribed," Katherine said, "and she's already hinted rather strongly that she wouldn't mind sharing the house with us until." She blushed slightly. Until we have a home of our own, Isaac finished for her, his eyes warming at her blush. I've been saving every penny from my wages. By spring, I should have enough for a down payment on a small property. Nothing grand, but a place we could build on over time. The thought of building a life, a home, a family with this man filled Katherine with a happiness she had scarcely dared to dream of. I don't need grand, she assured him. Just you? Isaac's restraint finally broke. He leaned forward, capturing her lips with his in a kiss that began gentle but quickly deepened with the force of feelings too long held in check. Katherine responded with equal fervor, her hands coming up to frame his face. When they finally parted, both breathing unevenly, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Katherine Grant. I think I began falling for you the moment you stood up to Blackwell that first day with fire in your eyes and that ledger clutched to your chest like a shield. Katherine smiled, her heart overflowing. And I love you, Isaac Turner, my champion, my partner, my future. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Twin Falls, with Elizabeth Grant beaming proudly and Isaac's mother, Margaret Turner, who had traveled all the way from Denver for the occasion, dabbing at her eyes throughout the ceremony. The entire town turned out for the celebration, with even the Millers closing the ranch for the day to attend. Harold Blackwell was conspicuously absent, having abruptly left Twin Falls 2 days after Katherine and Isaac's confrontation in his office. Rumors suggested the hotel owners had made a surprise visit and discovered irregularities in the accounts. No one connected these events to the new Mrs. Turner, though a few noted that she didn't seem particularly surprised by the news of Blackwell's departure. As autumn painted the surrounding countryside in golds and reds, Isaac and Katherine settled into their life together. They lived with Elizabeth Grant through the winter, saving their combined wages and making plans for their future. Isaac continued to impress Mr. Miller with his work ethic and knowledge, earning a reputation as one of the most skilled horsemen in the area. In the spring of 1886, true to his word, Isaac purchased 5 acres of land just outside Twin Falls, enough for a modest house, a small barn, and room to grow. With help from friends he'd made at the Miller Ranch, he built a simple but sturdy home, with Katherine contributing design ideas that made the space both practical and comfortable. By the time they moved into their new home in early summer, Katherine had news of her own to share. On their first night in the house, as they sat on their own porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues, she took Isaac's hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. I think our family may be growing sooner than we planned, she said softly, watching his face for his reaction. Isaac's expression transformed from confusion to wonder in the span of a heartbeat. A baby, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. We're going to have a baby. Katherine nodded, tears of happiness springing to her eyes. Dr. Patterson confirmed it yesterday. He expects the child will arrive in early December. Isaac gathered her into his arms, holding her as though she were made of the most precious porcelain. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. For making me the happiest man alive. Katherine leaned back to look into his face, seeing the sheen of tears in his eyes. We've come so far from that day you found me storming out of the hotel, she marveled. Who could have imagined that Blackwell's dishonesty would lead to such happiness? Isaac brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. I knew from the moment I saw you that you were something special, Katherine Turner. I just didn't know how completely you would change my life. For the better, I hope, she teased gently. Beyond anything I could have dreamed, he assured her, pulling her close again as the last rays of sunlight bathed their new home in golden light. On a snowy evening in December 1886, after 18 hours of labor that left Isaac pacing anxiously outside their bedroom door, Katherine gave birth to a healthy son they named James, after Isaac's father. Elizabeth Grant moved in temporarily to help with the baby, her health much improved and her joy in her grandson evident in every tender interaction. As the years passed, their family and prosperity grew together. Isaac's reputation as a horseman led to opportunities beyond the Miller Ranch. By 1890, he had established a small but respected horse breeding operation on their expanded property. specializing in strong, intelligent quarter horses that were in high demand throughout the territory. Katherine kept the books for their growing business while raising their children. James was joined by a sister, Margaret Elizabeth, in 1888, and another brother, William, in 1891. She also maintained a small accounting practice, helping other businesses in Twin Falls with their financial records. Her reputation for accuracy and integrity made her services highly sought after, particularly after Idaho achieved statehood and businesses faced new regulatory requirements. In the summer of 1895, a decade after their first meeting, Isaac and Katherine hosted a large gathering at their now substantial ranch to celebrate their 10th wedding anniversary. Friends and family traveled from as far as Denver and San Francisco to join the celebration, which lasted an entire weekend. On the final evening, as musicians played and lanterns illuminated the large yard where couples danced under the stars, Isaac drew Katherine away from the festivities, leading her to a quiet spot beneath the large oak tree they had planted the day they moved into their home. 10 years, he marveled, taking both her hands in his. Sometimes it feels like we met yesterday, and sometimes it feels like I've loved you all my life. Katherine squeezed his hands, her heart as full of love for him as it had been on their wedding day. The best 10 years of my life, she assured him, though I expect the next 10 to be even better. Isaac chuckled, the sound as warm and rich as it had been when she first heard it. At 38, he was still as handsome as the day they met, though his black hair now showed touches of silver at the temples. The life they had built together had been good to him, softening some of his harder edges while strengthening the core of who he was: a man of honor, integrity, and deep capacity for love. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket, to commemorate the occasion. He withdrew a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a delicate gold bracelet set with pearls that matched her engagement ring. Isaac, it's beautiful, Katherine breathed as he fastened it around her wrist. Not half as beautiful as you, he replied, his eyes moving appreciatively over her face. At 34, Katherine had matured from a pretty young woman into a striking one, her features refined by experience and happiness, her dark blonde hair now styled in a more sophisticated manner that suited her position as a successful businesswoman and mother. I've been thinking, Isaac continued, his expression growing more serious, about how our story began, with you fighting for what was rightfully yours. Katherine nodded, the memory of that desperate time now softened by the years that had followed. You know, Blackwell did you a favor in a way, Isaac mused. If he'd paid you what he owed, I might never have had a reason to speak to you that day. Then I suppose I should be grateful for his dishonesty, Katherine laughed, the sound light and carefree. Though I suspect fate would have found another way to bring us together. I like to think so too, Isaac agreed, pulling her into his embrace. Over her shoulder, he could see their children playing with cousins and friends, their home filled with light and laughter, their future secure in a way he had once thought impossible. Do you ever wonder what happened to him? Katherine asked, following his gaze back toward their gathering. To Blackwell, Isaac shrugged. I heard he ended up in Oregon trying to run another hotel, didn't last long there either. He brushed a kiss against her temple. Some men never learn. And some men, Katherine said, turning in his arms to face him, are wise enough to recognize what truly matters in life. You, Isaac said simply, you and our children, this life we've built together. He cupped her face in his hands. You were owed $75 that day, Katherine. I'd like to think I helped you get what was due, but the truth is, you've given me so much more in return. Katherine rose on tiptoe, pressing her lips to his in a kiss filled with the passion and tenderness of a decade shared. We've given each other a life neither of us could have imagined, she whispered against his lips. And that, my love, is worth more than all the gold in Idaho territory. From beneath the oak tree, they watched as their eldest son executed a perfect bow to a blushing young girl, leading her into the dance with a confidence that reminded Katherine of his father. Their daughter sat nearby, playing a complex game of cat's cradle with her grandmother, her laughter carrying across the yard. and their youngest chased fireflies with his cousins, his excited shouts punctuating the music. "We should rejoin our guests," Katherine finally said, though she made no move to leave Isaac's embrace. "In a minute," Isaac replied, his arms tightening around her waist. "Right now, I just want to hold my wife and count my blessings." As they stood together beneath the tree they had planted, surrounded by the life they had built from a chance meeting and a quest for justice, Katherine reflected that some debts could never be fully calculated or repaid, like the debt of gratitude she owed to fate for bringing Isaac Turner into her life that summer day. He had indeed made sure she got every penny she was owed, but more importantly, he had given her a love worth more than any fortune, and in the end, that was the true measure of their wealth.